How many clowns could fit in here?
16 clowns.
Have you ever been to Turkey? You know how many people get in a dolmus? About 27 is one of my experiences.
Okay.
So it's incredible how many people can fit into a car.
So here we are in the amazing DAF Museum with a person that, from what I've heard, has been working for DAF for more than 40 years.
47 years.
47 years. Henk, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Daniel. My name is Henk Meeuwis, and I'm working here as a volunteer in this museum for about 3 years now. As you said already, I've been working at DAF Trucks for 47 years, and I couldn't get loose of it. So I think maybe better do something useful in the museum. Huh?
Awesome.
So I'm happy to welcome you here in the museum, and I will give you a tour and explain the things that you are going to see, and tell you something about the history of DAF and where it all started.
Perfect, thank you so much. And I know that we have the first thing right behind us, right? Can you tell us more about this?
Yes, this nice little vehicle was a project from Huub van Doorne himself, and it was more or less done because he hated to get wet in the rain on his bicycle. So he created himself a little car, and it is so narrow because it had to be parked in the hill of his house. So he was using this to travel to the factory and back to home, and it had to be parked in the hill. And there's only one door in it, so that was a little bit dangerous. That's why later on they removed a part of the roof and put on a linen rooftop so that he could escape when it tilted. And there's another very nice thing on it, because it's got one front wheel and the engine was mounted on the front wheel. And in this aisle, at the end of that, was the stairs to the cellar. And if you turn the steering wheel around, it will, just like on the ferry, go backwards when you turn it around. So if our football team had become champion or something else had to be celebrated, it might be a problem in the next morning whether you go forward or backwards. So
you have to remind that every night.
Yes. So inventive as he was, he took the DAF logo, cut off one side of it, and put it on a pin directly mounted to the steering of to the wheel and the engine, so he could always see whether he would go.
To actually moves when you.
Yeah. So that's the kind of genius that he was. Always finding a very creative solution for each and every problem. Started with kind of welding work like stillages, and then later on there were the trailers, and later on.
You guys here actually like let all these scaled models to be created just like for you to be able to tell the history.
That's cool. Yeah. And well, you know what happens, as you already mentioned, the introduction of the new types. We always have to expand our window little by little.
You still have some place there.
Yeah. So DAF can go on. There doesn't have to be a break on that for that reason. So you see all kind of military trucks, passenger cars, buses, and it expands and expands and expands.
Wow.
And then the last models are also in here. So you can see that this is the new part.
NGD, the new generation,
The new generation, the XF, XG, XG Plus.
You have all the previous ranges as well, the yellow one, the legendary orange one, the blue one.
Yeah, that's the original introduction color. Okay, then we've got another window over here. And at the first glance you will say, what's that got to do with DAF? but it's all DAF components which were used in totally different products. For instance, DAF engines in ships, and DAF engines in agriculture vehicles, and special vehicles like GNAV and Terberg. They also use DAF engines and DAF cabs.
And I see Western Star there even.
Yeah, yeah. And also buses, which used DAF axles and DAF engines. And for the terminal, the container terminal, where also DAF engines were used. So a lot of products used, components actually used in other products. Yeah.
Do still ships use DAF engines?
Yeah, but not as many nowadays, but they still do. Okay. Yeah. The founders of this company, and first of all, I'd like to introduce Mr. Huub van Doorne. And this was a statue that he got because of his retirement. In those days, it was quite common that everybody retired on his 65th birthday. And if you look at the date, the 1st of January 1965. So that means actually that he was born on the 1st of January 1900. So it's a new decade, a new age, and a new year. A very special day. Wow. His brother, Wim van Doorne, who is also very important for the history of the company, was born 6 years later, and also retired 6 years later. And they always stood together because Huub was the one that was the genius, the inventor. He was the creative one, and Wim was the guy who looked at the economics, at the figures, and thought it through and tried to sell it, to market it. So it's a very good combination. Well, here we come to the explanation of the name DAF. It started with DAF, which stood for Van Doorne's aanhangwagenfabriek. So Van Doorne's trailer company.
Trailer company?
Yeah, it started with trailers. Oh. But then later on they also produced trucks and passenger cars, and then the trailer wasn't just for the name anymore. Yeah. So what did they do? They created a new name because DAF had already settled in the market. It was a very good brand, and they didn't want to lose that brand name. So they adjusted it to Van Doorne's Automobielfabriek, Van Doorne's automotive company.
That fits for everything.
Everything, yeah, very clever. Yeah. Huh? Yeah. As of here, we got a board.
So the whole room is dedicated just as like a history timeline.
Yes, it's a timeline.
Going, you can see on the bottom the years and some milestones.
The new chairman, who wasn't a Van Doorne, so he was the last Van Doorne, Piet van Doorne, who was a son from Huub van Doorne. And he was Aart van de Pad, was the first not family member. Then Corbaan came in, and then we were taken over by Packard. And then, of course, we got an American who was going to tell us how to run a business. That's what he was trying. But they learned from us, and we learned from them. I still think that it was a great opportunity that Packard took over DAF, because DAF was just restoring from the breakdown, the bankruptcy in 1993. And the market was still
hungry. Or not.
But keeping back because they didn't know what they could trust in this company, because it had gone bankrupt. And it was difficult to have all that capital, all that money. So now Packard took over, and that was run by a very rich family, the Piggott family, and they had a lot of money. So the market got more comfortable by the idea of buying a DAF. And Packard was very happy because they did not have any engine technology. And they bought the engine.
It was a win-win situation.
It was a win-win situation. Yes. And I'm still very happy because of the economics. Because when things go right in America, it might slow down a little bit in Europe, and the other way around. So that's how we are helping each other. But also we learned goal setting, target setting from the Americans, because here it was old-fashioned way. And on the other hand, they learned to appreciate the stubbornness of the Dutch people and the directness of the Dutch people. So one of the first products were these agriculture what do you call it, trailers, no?
Yeah.
And actually looking at this one, it's a very special one because actually it's the first hybrid vehicle.
Is it?
Because hybrid, the definition of hybrid is that it has more power sources. And this one you could put behind a horse or behind a tractor. So here we've got an example of a trailer in those days. This was the original, authentic office of Huub van Doorne.
And who's that lady? That's wife?
His wife. So it's actually his desk and the chairs, it's all original. It has been restored, of course, and polished. And but it's his phone that he used and the lamp on the desk, all
Those are authentic. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it used to be at the Gelderopseweg, where the factory is, but we placed it in here. There used to be 2 identical offices, and in between was the boardroom. And these 2 offices were, of course, occupied by Wim and Huub van Doorne. The one from Wim is still there, and the one from Huub is in here. And the chairman of the board from today is still working in the office of Wim van Doorne.
And what are these medals? And
these are all medals
from
and
war?
awards from Huub van Doorne and Wim van Doorne. So they got honorary doctor and they got a lot of rewards for everything that they... because maybe you don't know, but one of the first patents of Huub van Doorne was the 5th wheel, the kingpin.
so that's their pattern?
Yeah. Yeah. It started with this, and this is still nowadays the worldwide standard. It's one of the 160 patents of Huub van Doorne. Yeah. So he was a very creative and genius. He was. Yeah.
I actually know what it is.
Yeah.
What this is. I know that this is the car that the DAF created for the royal family, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It was a birthday or a birth present
Yeah.
for Willem-Alexander, for his parents. So it was designed by Michelotti, who was an Italian designer who was connected to DAF. He did a lot of design for the passenger cars for DAF in those days. And he designed this holiday car because it was more or less a beach buggy.
With no doors. And
Yeah, it was designed in let's say a little bit shipyard style. So all the wood inside and the chairs and also the name of Willem-Alexander is on the side. So it's officially his car. And it was used in Porto Ercole, which was the holiday address in Italy where the royal family spent a lot of time. And you can see here at the pictures that he was only a very little boy when he first sat in it. And then for 2 years ago, because of Corona, we couldn't celebrate the King's Day as we normally do. And then they made a parade just to have some celebration.
Which we can see on the TV. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Willem-Alexander himself drove this little car. So we got it down because it was always upstairs there. And we got it down and fixed it that it could drive again. It started immediately and then stopped immediately. But then we had to blow through the piping and it was, of course, because of the time that it has been standing, it was all full with crap. So that little vehicle has been everywhere in the world and it's now standing up there in the gallery. So here we have an inside look of an ancient workshop, repair, garage.
Shell, nice.
And as you can see under the hood, it's a very simple engine, 2-cylinder, air-cooled, and you could fix everything yourself.
Oh, you even have a mechanic, right?
Yeah, but he's got a bigger problem because we haven't seen him on the coffee break for a while. But as you can see under the hood, you can fix everything yourself because there's a lot of space over there and it's all mechanic. So nowadays, if it doesn't have a plug, they just look at you with big question marks in their eyes. Huh? They don't know
nowadays
what to do.
It's all covered with...
Well, Huub thought if I buy an engine and I buy some axles and I put it together, I have a truck.
Yeah.
Because in those days, a truck factory would make it like this and then it would be driven to a cap maker and he would make a cap on it. So this was actually the product that a truck builder would make. And trucks like these were delivered to Goes mainly in Zealand, which was quite a distance. It was a day's journey in those days. Only they had to drive it over there like that, on a wooden chair. And if he was lucky, there was one like this standing ready for driving back. And if he was not lucky, he had to take off the chair and put it under his arm and go back to Eindhoven by train. And in the 70s, when I started at DAF, they still did this with bus chassis. And in those days, even in wintertime, and in those days in Heerenveen was a very famous coach builder, Hanje. And one of the guys had to be taken off and defrosted at the stove because he was frozen. And that's when they stopped doing it in wintertime. So the roads in those days were so bad and so poor that there would not ever be one moment that all four wheels would touch the ground. So he invented a Pendle Axle, which was a free moving axle in between the two leaf springs, which were mounted in a 90 degrees corner. So now, if the road is bad, you can see that each and every wheel is still touching the ground. So simple, but still so genius.
Yeah.
And if you had a problem with the inside wheel, it wasn't all that difficult to tilt it, turn it around, and then you could fix it. So DAF was very successful with the chassis. That's the construction that we see over there. So a lot of special users came to DAF for the chassis. Firefighters, cranes. There's not a lot of luxury because they didn't drive long distances. It's just getting there as soon as possible. That's also the reason why there are no keys used on the locks, because it would be a terrible disaster if the guy would be over here and then, oh God, my keys. So we also do restorations ourselves, and at this moment we are working on this project called Doornroosje in Dutch, which would be Cinderella, I think. Yeah. So she's been asleep for quite a long time, then was found somewhere in a barn, stacked under the hay and completely rusted and just a wreck. And then they demounted everything, each and every part. And we are at this moment in the situation that we have restored the chassis, and the engine has also been brought back in the original state. And the engine has already run, so we know that's okay. Yeah. And now the cab is over to the paint shop, where it has to be painted. So
it's nearly done, like?
Yeah, but all the interior of the cab still has to be done. True. So there's still a lot of work on it, and it takes months and years to do a project like this because it's all volunteers. Okay, another design from partly Huub van Doorne, because if we go back to the 30s. And we see Hitler coming in Germany, and Germany is expanding, and there is a war threat. And there were a lot of civil trucks, but no military trucks. So the Dutch government said, that's very dangerous, so we need to do something. And they appointed a Dutch military guy and Huub van Doorne together to find a solution for that. And they did, and they called it Trado, because that Dutch guy was van der Trappen. And Van Doorne, so Trado, together was the invention that they did. And with that, they could rebuild a civil truck within a few hours into a military truck or a off-road truck. Dismount the wheel and then mount this construction, and you had a four-wheel driven axle.
I can see.
With a special construction,
on the image.
Independent left side, right side, so it could move all terrains actually, and it was makeable in a few hours time. So they used a lot of that to build under not only DAFs but also Ford used it. And then there was also a winch on that, and if you look at this one, that is the weapon carrier, and it used to have a cannon running behind. So if it was connected with a special winch, if the terrain was too hard, they could uncouple, drive on, and then with the winch pull back the cannon, but it was an automatic winch, because if it would come back, it would automatically get in here because of this construction, and also be secured, so they didn't need to get out of the truck. They just could do that within the truck. Cap over engine front steering caps also has a history. One day in Europe, they set a new standard for the total length of a vehicle. And if you have the total length of a vehicle and you have a torpedo front, that's all wasted space where you can't earn money with.
Yeah.
But it was very handy to do repairs on the engine. So later on they constructed the front steering cap, as we see over there. But they still had a problem with the repairing on the engine, because then they had to dismount the chair, dismount the hood inside, and then you needed to be a circus artist to get to the engine to do repairs. So later on they invented the tilted cap, as you can see on the picture over there.
Yeah.
And the yellow one there is 1969, the first tilted cap by DAF. DAF was not the inventor, was an early adopter, and that one is actually the first DAF tilted cap. Yeah. So military was always, there used to be days that we made 8 military vehicles a day, and we always said that is going to be the only 8 vehicles that day that is the same, because they always produced to customer requirement. So all the trucks were different, except the 8 militaries. This is also a military project. We go back to the 60s, early 60s, and there was a war going on in Vietnam. America was fighting in Vietnam in the Mekong Delta, and they had a highly need for light vehicles that could transport ammunition, but also carry out the wounded and the deceased. So they also asked DAF to make a prototype and to make an offer, because DAF had invented the Variomatic, which was very easily driving, of course. You don't have to shift gears, it's just throttle and brake, and that's all. So they also asked DAF to make an offer and a prototype, and DAF did that with this vehicle that they called the Pony. And it's very simple. The original prototype doesn't have a battery in it, because it's very difficult to load the battery in the Mekong Delta. So they just had a cable, like on your mowing machine. You pull the cable and then the engine will start. Also, if the weight was too high with the driver on it, he could release the steering wheel, put it on here backwards, and then with a hand throttle, walk behind the vehicle and drive it. Yeah? And that was also very handy if there were too many bullets flying around. So he would have a little bit of protection. So the American Army was very enthusiastic. They said, let's have about 4,000 of them. And then Wim van Doorne looked at the contract and he saw that they had to be produced in America. And that's where they hooked off. They said, no, we're not going to do that. So the deal broke and they didn't make it. So here you can have a nice look inside. And then first of all, you have to explain that there are no sparks, no plugs on it, because that's not required for diesel. So the diesel will be brought in, the air will be brought in, and because of the pressure, the temperature will rise and then it will explode. And then the piston will go down to the crankshaft, through the comrod on the crankshaft, and that will make the movement turning around. And then it is through the gearbox, and then in the differential where you translate it 90 degrees, and so you could have the power on the wheels to drive forward and backwards because of the gearbox, of course. That is something that you don't need at a Variomatic for the passenger car. So that will drive backwards as fast as forward, and I'll explain later to you how that is possible. So here we have all kinds of different models of ancient trucks, also concrete mixers. And here we have the first sleeping cab.
First sleeping cab?
A sleeper cab, yeah.
Oh, so there's a bed.
Yeah, there's a bed in there, yeah.
Very small one.
Very simple.
Small one.
Yeah. No, that was quite a discussion because with the release of the sleeper cab, the allowance that the drivers got because of the fact that they had to spend the night somewhere. And this was the first one, so it was very primitive. And nowadays the idea at DAF is the bed should be better than at home. And that is what they actually do. The mattresses are very, very good. Yeah. And now the XG Plus even has a feature that you can adjust the bed electronically. So
that's a big difference.
Amazing.
Big difference to take a look into this one and into the XG Plus.
The engine history, yes, it's quite a story because in those days the petrol engines weren't powerful enough anymore because the distances grew and the weights grew. So they had a need for diesel engines. But the problem was that diesel engines in those days were not all that good. They were powerful, but they were leaking a lot of oil. So they used more oil than diesel, they sometimes said. And Huub van Doorn did his search throughout Europe, and then he came out at Leyland in the UK. And he thought that was the worst diesel engine that he could find. So he bought them over there, transported them to Eindhoven, then dismounted a lot of parts, put in new parts, ceilings, gaskets, things like that. And then it was sold as a Leyland DAF engine. And that was quite a success because they were a lot better than the common diesel engines. And because of this success, the numbers grew. And it was very expensive to get all these engines over to Eindhoven, dismount them and fix them. And then, so he asked Leyland if he could get himself a license to build Leyland engines in Eindhoven. And Leyland agreed. So he could build them directly first time here in Eindhoven. So that was saving a lot of money for transport and for dismounting. But most important, I think, was the fact that he got all the technical details and data from the engine. So what he then did was copy and improve. So he started with this Leyland design, copied it, and then improved it and brought it into the DAF diesel engine, of which this one was the first, the DD575, the DAF diesel 6-liter engine. Yeah, you always have to grade it up a little bit. So it was 5.75, but was called the DAF 6-liter engine. Yeah. And then this was the concept, basically copied from the Leyland concept, 6 cylinders in line, and that's what DAF still does. Never had any V engines or 8-cylinder engines, always 6 in line. So even the MX nowadays, the heaviest one is 6 in line. Yeah. And DAF was very successful with his engines. So successful that now in America, because we are a PACCAR company, and in America the Kenworth and the Peterbilt trucks, they are using the DAF engine. It's called a PACCAR engine, because DAF doesn't sell in America, of course, but it's a DAF design. It's still developed here in Eindhoven. And they built a copy factory from the Eindhoven engine factory in Columbus, Mississippi. And actually the plant manager from the Eindhoven company went over there to do that and is still there running that factory over there.
So this is the one you told us about?
Yes, that's right. This is a very special type, the A107, and it was made out of 2 racks that they found on Curaçao on the island, and actually we have pictures here of these 2 racks. And you can see that a lot of work has been done in that time. So it was restored to this one special truck, which is also drivable. And everything is back to the original standard. It's got official Curaçao license plates as well. Bombini is on it. So
this one is your favorite one from the whole DAF Museum?
Yeah. It is. And I am proud, and I did not do anything about it myself, but I'm very proud that people here in our workshop are able to make a product like this so beautiful and so back to the original. So here we have a very nice old garbage truck, and what was special about this one was that the garbage cans were alongside the road.
These exact of this size, and the truck was coming only for those small cans. Yeah,
so the cans were on the side of the road, and people just have to tilt them and then
On their own?
On their own,
Oh.
yeah. So it was quite a heavy
So
job.
it was only a driver and the truck? No, like...
And there were two people standing on here,
okay.
and they did
I
that
see.
as a job. And they didn't need to go to the gymnastics in the evening because they had a lot of training during the day. But the problem was that actually when they have emptied about 20 cans, it would all be stacked up here. And in the front there would be still a lot of space to be filled. So actually there was a possibility to tilt the total thing. You can see that on the
Yes, I can see.
works over there. So you could tilt it like that.
And to
Then
get
all the garbage
the
would
trash
get in the
garbage
front.
into-
And then at the end of the day, they would go to the garbage collecting place, and they could tilt it like that to empty it.
Like
Yeah.
other ways.
Very special construction. Yeah.
How often does such garbage truck or had such garbage truck to drive and collect cans? Because these cans are quite small, right?
Once a week.
Okay.
Once a week, and people didn't have that much in those days, huh? So they didn't have much garbage.
That's true. That's true.
And there was no
packaging and-
online buying, so there was no packaging.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Then later on, you got this movement, a kind of a wheel that would transport the garbage to the front. Huh? And nowadays it's all by pressure, hydraulics. Yeah. So then we have a lot of vehicles that were quite common in those days. The 2800. That was the flagship during the time that I started at DAF in the beginning of the 70s. And this one actually always transported cattle. And it ran about 750,000 kilometers. Wow. You say wow, but that's nothing for a trucker. If you look at the red one over here, it's done 2 million kilometers.
Okay.
And the first million it drove to long distance Italy. And the second million was collected in the Benelux, here, Belgium, Luxembourg and the Netherlands. And it could run another million without any problem. So, yeah. So first I would like to explain a little bit about turbo and especially turbo intercooling. You know what turbo actually does?
Yeah, sucks the
So it is compressing the inlet air to get more power. Because if you can get more air in the inlet and you can add more fuel, more diesel, and then you will have a larger explosion and therefore more power. Only the problem is if you press the air together, it will rise in temperature. And
you need to cool it.
so it will expand again. So to bring back that low temperature, you have to cool the air again. And that is also a discovery from DAF, the intercooling. So the turbo was already existing, and then DAF invented the intercooling by an extra radiator and cooling the inlet air. Then later on it was all a little bit more sophisticated and it was called ATI, which stands for Advanced Turbo Intercooling. DAF wanted to join the Dakar Rally because they needed possibilities to develop and to test. And like the Formula One nowadays is the test ground for the production of our passenger car, in those days rallies were also the testing facility for the truck industry, especially the Paris-Dakar. Because actually they were driving from Paris to Dakar. That was the reason why it was called like that. And DAF wanted to expand in Africa. And this rally was driven most of the mileages in Africa, so that was a good advertising. And they joined the rally in 1981 with a standard truck which has been optimized and a crew from our DAF colleagues. And unfortunately, during unloading and aggregate, it fell down, it fell on the arm of the driver, so he was injured, broke his arm, had to be transported to the hospital, and somebody else had to join the cab because they still needed 3 people in it, and that's the reason why they were disqualified. So they still drove and they finished in Dakar, but without classification. And the next year they thought maybe we need somebody else to drive, and they asked Jan de Rooij. You ever heard of Jan de Rooij? Jan de Rooij, look him up at YouTube. You won't understand what he's saying, but it's nice to see the picture.
Okay.
And if you understood Dutch, you wouldn't even understand what he's saying, because he's got no teeth and so. But he's a nice guy, and he was the driver in 1982 with another DAF truck, and he finished as first in the truck classification, and he was very good. And the year after also. He was quite ahead at Steam, and then they got problems with an axle, and they had to do repairing, and they lost over 6 hours. And over 6 hours is quite a lot of time. He still managed to finish as third in that rally. So at DAF everybody was happy, only Jan de Rooij was not happy at all, and he was not satisfied. He said, I need more power. And everybody started thinking, and they all said, it's not possible, that's all the power we can get out of an engine. And then somebody said, no, then you take 2 engines. As simple as that. And they built a truck in 1984 with 2 engines. Actually, it were 2 trucks built together, and they didn't have enough time to dismount the second cab. So it's called a 2-headed truck. It's got 2 cabs and 2 engines. And it was very successful. And a year later they had the Bull, which is on the picture over here. And that is also a truck with 2 engines. 1 engine for the front axle and 1 engine for the rear axle. And then Jan came back and he said, I want to go for the classification overall, not only trucks, so fast he was. And he said, but I have to let go throttle in the dunes because I am too high. My gravity point is much too high, so I have to lose speed, otherwise I would tilt over. So they said, we have to bring it down. And everybody said, it's not possible. And still somebody said, yeah, but maybe. What they did then was just cut off the chassis at the front end and the rear end, build in a new frame in the middle, and put the 2 engines, instead of 1 at the end, at the rear and 1 at the front, both engines in the middle next to each other. Here you can see the frame, light metal frame. On this side an engine, and on the other side an engine. So the gravity point is brought down quite a lot, but also the weight is spread out so that it will be more stable instead of just in the middle. And it was quite a success, because in the desert, Jan de Rooij overtook with his truck Arie Vatanen, who was the most famous rally driver in passenger cars. He was overtaken by a truck and he didn't know what happened. This truck has got 1,220 horsepower.
That's a lot.
And the maximum speed of a truck, 220 to 230 kilometers an hour. So it's not allowed anymore, it's too dangerous. But this is racing on a circuit, and there was only 1 driver, of course. You did not need a mechanic on the way on the circuit, and a navigator was not applied. But if you look at the engine, so those 2 engines together were 1,220 horsepower. This 1 engine alone has got 1,350. And it would last for about 3 or 4 races, and then finished. Completely finished. Yeah. And you could unscrew the turbos and some other small parts, but the engine was finished then. Yeah. So here we have our trailer bus.
Bus and a truck in one.
Yeah. The story of this is that there was a lot of industry here in the region, in Eindhoven and surrounding. So we had Philips, we had DAF, we had Picus. We also had cigar industry, cigarette industry. So they needed a lot of employees, but people did not have a car. So they could come by foot or by bicycle, but if they needed more people, they had to come from farther away.
And during winter.
And also during winter. Yeah. So what did Philips start? That was the possibility to collect people at home nearby. So they drove to Belgium, to the province of Limburg, to the other side of North Brabant, and they collected people near their homes and then drove them to the factory. And they did that by bus, for instance, but then the bus had to wait all day and the driver had to wait all day. And there were not that many buses in those days. And there was a lot of trailers that weren't used anymore, so they've prepared the trailers for passenger transport. And the advantage was that they could decouple
and use the truck during the day.
Use the truck to transport loads and then come back in time, couple again, and then bring the people home. Yeah, there was only one small thing, and we are still laughing about it nowadays. But up until today, it is forbidden to transport people in a trailer. So that they hadn't realized at that moment. So they had to do a lot of extra work and pleading to get allowances to do so, and they succeeded. So the lobbying was enough, and they got permittance to do so. But there were a lot of people transported like that. So this, for instance, is one of the streets near Philips, and you can see that it is big business. Huh? It was the same at DAF and at the other factories.
Buses,
yeah. So the one that we are now repairing, the Doorner Roosje, that is the one that's got to be in front of this. And it will be sprayed in the same color, and you can see the DAF logo on there.
So later you will switch it, so that will match the truck, the trailer. That will look cool.
Yeah.
I believe like back in the days, like it was quite common that everyone in one house was working either for DAF or Philips. So even the wife and husband, both of them every morning get into the bus.
That's right.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And up until today, we are still collecting. As if I still work there, but I still think it's a little bit my company. But they are still collecting people in Belgium, and they have to start at 7 o'clock at the factory, and they have to do a 1.5 hours drive. So they are collected at 5 o'clock and delivered at home at 6 o'clock, 6:30, and then they have to eat and go to bed. So what social life do they have? It's a DAF bus, and it has been brought back in this ancient looks. And if you have a look inside by walking through here, so you can see it is always also very handy to have people who have experience in furnishing and things like that, interior styling. So the ashtray is always one of the remarkable things that I point out to people. So everyone was smoking.
The seats were quite small.
Yeah, people were small in those days. Huh? And this is one of the buses that was quite common in Holland. Every region had a bus like this, but then in a different color setting. So this one is from the Twente area, which would be on the northeast side of the Netherlands. And every region had its own coloring. What is very clever is the small window over here.
You can see more of the pedestrians.
Nowadays we have the front camera or the front mirror, but in those days we didn't have that. So this was a solution to have a better view at the front of your vehicle.
Here we are at the floor dedicated to personal cars?
Yes, we still have a little bit of truck over here, the light trucks.
Pony.
So this is the pony that I told you about down there. Huh? This is the actually first prototype without a battery, but you can start it with this cord over here, just like your mowing machine.
That's marketing they did for
it? Yes.
That lady pushing it.
Yeah.
What is this?
This is the Variomatic, and actually it's replacing a gearbox. And I always try to explain it in a simple way. So if you are riding your bike and you want to start off, you would like to have a small gear wheel at the front to get movement, and a big gear wheel at the rear end, so that you can put force on the road. Once you have speed, you would like to have a larger gear wheel at the front, so you won't have to move so fast. And at the rear end, you want the wheel spinning more, so a smaller gear wheel. That's what's happening in the Variomatic. Once you get speed, you will see that this part will come in and it's all conish. So the rubber belt will be pushed upwards here and torn downwards down here because there is a spring force in here. And that means that you now have a bigger gear wheel at the front and a smaller gear wheel at the rear end. Once the speed is going down again, you see that the spring force is going to win and overwin the force from this wheel over here. So that's all. That's a Variomatic. And the question remains, why does this wheel come in? And that is very simple, by centrifugal power. Because you know, and you can remember if you did some experiments at school and you got a bucket full of water, it was not allowed to turn it around. But if you swing with it, the water will stay inside, like the laundry in the centrifuge in the laundry machine. So there are small weights in here, and these weights are connected to the shaft, and they are actually torn outside because of the movement, and then they will put pressure on the wheel here, and that will be forced inside and bring up the belt. So it doesn't matter whether this is turning left side round or right side round. So you can go backwards as fast as forward. Yeah. So that's the basic secret of the Variomatic.
That's also why the races of going backwards, like you told us previously, happened because of that. Because of this.
Yeah. Because the DAF would go as fast backwards as forward, but the driver wouldn't. So the drivers were not capable of doing that, of course. So they damaged and destroyed a lot of DAFs in those days. But we still have enough remaining for our museum anyway. So Huub van Doorne has discovered this. This is also his most famous patent, actually. And then he had to sell it to the passenger car world. And that was quite difficult. And in the end, he said, okay, then I'll make my own passenger car and I'll put this in. And that's what he did. So he introduced in 1958 the first Dutch family car, which was provided with the Variomatic. It was a very simple two-cylinder engine, air-cooled, 590 cc, so it was called the DAF 600. The first passenger car, and it was very spaceful, and some of the advertisement was also that the gentleman could keep the head on at the rear seat. And that was very important in those days. So there was enough space to do so. Also, they could use it for the weekend or holidays because they could take some luggage at the trunk. And it was a very luxurious car in those days. Although it didn't even have outside mirrors. Which is quite remarkable.
So this was used as a turn indicators?
Yes, yeah. That's right. And inside was this little, what we call in Dutch, pintere pookje. So it was this clever stick, is the translation. So forward or backwards, that's all you have to do.
I can see the designs of the wheel covers are slowly getting back into the trend with the electric cars, right? They try to cover as much as the wheels as possible again.
So during the introduction, DAF made a mistake, and actually it is a mistake that they are still talking about in marketing education. They say don't make the same mistake DAF did when they introduced their new passenger car. But they said it was a car that everybody could drive. Even women can drive a car like this. And in those days,
you don't say things
they dare to say
you
that.
Can't say things like that.
No. But that meant that a lot of women were actually driving these cars, and the tough guys wouldn't drive it anymore because it was a women's car. And because of the Variomatic with the two belts, it also, when it started, was shivering around with the backhand side, and that's why they called it in Dutch a trutterschudder. So it was a bit shaker, something like that. Huh? And then, so it got a bad name, and tough guys didn't want to drive it anymore. And that's why DAF had to spend a lot of money in rally sport and racing sport to get a better image, to improve that. And one of the things that he did as well was the second vehicle was presented to the first female mayor of Holland. And her husband was the mayor of Oost, West and Middelbeers, 3 small villages here nearby Eindhoven. But he was punished during the war and brought to death by the Germans because he didn't want to cooperate with them. In 2013, the phone was ringing at DAF, and somebody called and gave his name, and he said he came from Ermelo and he was driving a DAF 600. It was 2013. This model was introduced in '58. So the guy at DAF, he had to be put back on his chair again, and then he said, "Are you still driving that?" "Yes, I'm still driving that." "From what year is it?" "From 1961, he said. "So that's over 50 years old." "Yes, that's correct." "So, and you are still driving with that here in Holland?" No, in Ermelo, near Cape Town in Africa." So then it was also explained why the steering wheel is on the other side, and actually they couldn't help him. They put him through to the museum. We were able to help him, and then we said, if you ever are going to sell this car, please let us know, because we would like to buy it and to make arrangements to get it over here. And DAF Trucks helped us to transport it from Africa to Eindhoven, and it was not restored or anything.
So this is the condition
that we got it in. Yeah, and he has been
still
driving
looks
it.
like in very good shape.
Yeah. But it's a dry and a warm country. So now we get to the rally and racing of the passenger cars. As I said, the tough guys didn't want to drive in a DAF, so they joined the London Sydney Rally. And they also joined the Formula 3 races with a Variomatic in the race car. So here you can see that the Variomatic is used. And instead of shifting gears, you just have to push the throttle and it will all be done automatically. So they gained a lot of speed and a lot of time by doing this. And it even got that far that they used the CVT, the metal band, in the Formula 1. So Williams Renault actually had a test car, Formula 1, which was driven by David Coulthard. And it had the CVT, so the metal belt, in there, and it didn't have to shift gears, and it was 3 to 5 seconds per round faster than the competition.
So they banned it.
The competition protested, and the FIA said, okay, let's make a new rule. Every Formula 1 car needs to have at least 6 gears. And nowadays it's 8, but they started out with at least 6. And that was the end of the CVT in the Formula 1. But now we are going to see the E, the Formula E, and you don't have gears anymore. So it's more or less the same result. But it was a pity in those days, yes, because it was very, very fast. So David Coulthard was very excited about it. And the Variomatic was also used in race cars for endurance races, for the 24-hour races. So it was quite a success. No. Then we'll go on to the regular passenger cars. And you can see these are all designs from DAF itself. And they have this low profile. And then later on, Michelotti, the Italian designer, came to DAF, and then he made some adjustments where we got this higher profile on the front. And then as of the 44, he was the main designer of the total concept. but he first made some adjustments on the other types.
And these were like estate versions, like
for commercial purposes. Yeah, or the plumber or the painter or whatever, small businesses. But also the post office was using the DAFs. They also used it for repairs. They could take a lot of equipment.
Tires
them.
maybe.
Yeah. And tooling and things like that. Yeah. So here you can see the first total design from Michelotti. And it's got a closed grille like the electric cars nowadays. But it's still this air-cooled engine, but the cooling is under the bumper.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And here you can see, I always like to point that out, what a striping can make a difference on the front looks of a car. So it's exactly the same front.
Oh yeah, but there's
but another striping. And it looks completely different. Yeah. And the police were also using it. And they were very fast with it. I didn't like that because I had a moped which was had some extra power, but you could only get away through a small L, otherwise they were too fast.
And that siren holder was not really aerodynamic, right?
Then by making a marathon version and a coupe as well, they made it more interesting for the younger people. But then came...
but this one is Volvo.
Yeah. Then came 1975 and they had designed a completely new model, the DAF 77. And it was already built prototypes and it was ready for production. Only they needed a lot of money to adjust the factory for this new model because it was completely different. And the money wasn't available at those days. So they had to make a decision, what are we going to do? Try a little bit of both? Or just focus on the passenger car or focus on the truck division. And then they finally agreed upon focusing on the truck division. And they sold the passenger car division to Volvo. Because Volvo was also already connected to DAF. And then from one day to the other, the same model of car, this is another version, but it's the same type. It was changed it to Volvo. It had another grille, it had another bumper and auto batching, and the rest was all the same. The same people made it, the same design. So it was all the same car, but then it was a Volvo. And then later on, that new DAF 77 design was released by Volvo as the Volvo 343, which was a very successful car. And because of the 1 millionth, one artist had to decorate it like this.
Okay.
And because they sold 1 million of that
of these
version. Yeah. Volvo 343. And then here at the end we have some models, prototypes that didn't come into production.
That orange one, that orange one looks beautiful.
When I came to apply here for helping out, being a volunteer, I just jokingly said, okay, I'll do it if I can have this one for a weekend. And then they said, yes, okay.
And you did? You did get it for a weekend?
No, they said you're going to have a lot of problems with it because there's no engine in it.
But you can have it for a weekend.
Yeah. It's a nice joke, huh?
Yeah. But it's really beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It looks like a Porsche.
Yeah, 911.
Yeah. It's very nice, yeah. But it was too expensive. And the market wasn't ready for it.
Why it was so expensive? Because of the welding, like bending of the material, welding and everything?
Yeah. And also the scale that you could sell it on. The expectations were not that high because of the price. It would be
so it would be
very
more like
difficult.
A luxury car.
Yeah. So unfortunately they stopped with it, and another model prototype was this one, which was designed by Michelotti, and it was the first prototype of the DAF 55, but also for the same reason, much too expensive, no market for it. But Michelotti was very disappointed because he loved this car. He said, okay, I'll drive it myself. And he actually did. So he got it on the road with all the permits and everything that was needed. And he actually drove it for several years. And then, it was redundant and found back later on and restored, and now it's here. Yep. And here also some models that didn't get production facilities.
These look like they actually would survive to be in the production, like, and on the market.
Yeah. But never got to it. That is more or less the 44, but then a little bit blown up. And this was a design for a 4-door passenger car. And then it was more or less the end of the passenger car division, and it never got into production anymore. Yeah.
And this is the one you told us about.
Exactly.
Previously.
Yes, this is the part 2 of the Willem-Alexander version. This one was owned by Onassis and his wife Jackie Onassis. Yeah. And it sailed all 7 seas, as we say, and it was unloaded, and once they got into a harbor, then they drove around with it and loaded back when they sailed out again. Yeah. It's a nice thing, yeah. And then here we've got a picture of the male side of the Van Doorne family with Huub van Doorne, Wim van Doorne, and all the males in the family at that time. And that's where we owe all the successes from DAF and that's all coming from that family. And we have the pleasure to have 2 grandsons in our board. They're also volunteer. So Mark van Doorne, who is the grandson of Huub van Doorne, he is the honorable chairman of the board. And Reinier van Doorne, he is board member since 1.5 years now, I think. And he is going to do innovation and publicity and things like that. Nice. And it's good to have grandsons from the family in our house to spread the news and the nice things about the museum.
Henk, thank you so much. It was a lot of great information, a lot of great stories. It was awesome to be able to get someone that's passionate about this place like you are. Thank you so much for the guide.
Thank you. It was my honor, and I always like it very much if somebody says that he had pleasure in being here and he enjoyed it. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And who knows, maybe you'll come back one day and we'll see each other again. Yeah?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for visiting us.
Okay, thanks. And we will see you at the next episode.